Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Energy MD podcast, where we help you resolve your long COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome naturally so that you can get back to living your best life. I'm Evan Hirsch, and today I'm really excited because we're going to be speaking with somebody who has overcome Lyme disease, and we're going to talk about the tools that she used to do so. So, for the people that we work with who have long COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome, the majority of those people do have Lyme disease, and they have a combination of some of the co-infections that go along with that and other infections as well. So I think this is going to be especially valuable today. So let's learn a little bit about Tanya. So Tanya Hoebel is the host of the podcast Lyme and Beyond with Tanya, where lived experience meets compassion, hope, and empowerment for those navigating Lyme disease and chronic illness. After a 13-year journey from undiagnosed to bedridden to thriving, Tanya turned her personal struggles into a mission to help others feel less alone and more confident in being their own advocates. Through her podcast and advocacy work, Tanya is passionate about bringing hope, education, and support to the chronic illness community while encouraging others to take charge of their health journey with confidence and resilience. Tanya, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Evan, for having me. I think it's going to be great. Lyme disease is a hot topic. There's a lot of ticks out there, an abundance of them right now, right? So super happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, so let's start off with your story. I don't like to go too deep into people's stories because I want to make sure we get to everything else, but I do want to hear a little bit about what your experience was and kind of some of the pivotal moments for you.
Okay. So I was happy and healthy, thought I was doing all the right things, and I was landscaping my front yard, and I ended up with the bullseye rash on my ankle.
Mm.
And little did I know what that meant. So I go about my life, and 4 years later, looking back, there was probably some emotional trauma going on at the time. And I believe that those types of things, physical, emotional trauma, are what can trigger the dormancy of Lyme in our body. So I believe
Mm.
that that's probably what happened in my case. And so I started having some random symptoms. They started with pain. My first one was in my elbow. So, of course, what do? You go to the doctor, they do an MRI, they do all the physical therapy, not getting the answers. And I thought, okay, well, supposedly, I guess I have tennis elbow. I'm going to roll with that, even though it's in the opposite arm that I'm even dominant in. And I don't play tennis, which I know that there's no correlation. But nonetheless, I thought, okay, well, and then the other one started hurting. And, kind of fast forward over the years, just more and more things happened. And I continued down a rabbit hole of trying to get some answers. And, every time I would be thrown a diagnosis like fibromyalgia, okay, great. Now I have a name to what's going on. Back in the day, don't want to date myself, go to the library. I check out all the books on fibromyalgia, and I'm like, no, I don't think so. Sounds like a lot of people can really kind of live with this. It's an inconvenience maybe, but something else has got to be going on. And then I did discover that I had some metal toxicity. Had mercury poisoning really bad. So I did do some chelation for about a year and a half from that. And I'm sure that I had it, but I continued to get worse. And so I'm like, okay, well, that wasn't my answer, but maybe something that did need to be addressed.
Mhm.
And then kind of, I guess at the end of the day was you're crazy. You're overworked, you're stressed. It's all in your head. Unless you get counseling, you're not going to get well. And so, of course, what does that do to somebody? You take all their hope away, right? And so this happy-go-lucky social butterfly became suicidal.
Mm.
Like, if nothing's wrong with me, I can't get well, right? And if I can't get well, I can't live this way. And so I think that that's part of what a lot of people that deal with a chronic illness, when they're trying to find answers and going down the rabbit hole, we are misunderstood, we're not believed, and it's really a frustrating journey. So it was finally about 7 years in that I said, okay, well, what technically, I guess my pivotal moment was I had a legal business and I was in court one day, which, by the way, I would drive past it all the time, end up in another town, have no idea where I was going to. So I'm in court one day. The judge asked my name and who I represented, and I didn't know my name. And I thought, okay, that's it. If I don't figure this out, I truly think I'm going to die. So I went home that night. I called my parents. I said, I'm throwing in the towel, but not in the way that you think, right? Like I've got to focus on figuring out what's wrong with me, or I truly think that I'm going to die. And so that's truly when I became my own advocate and kind of left the, allopathic traditional medicine field and seeked alternatives. And luckily I did. About the time I moved, I actually ended up bedridden and I had a caregiver.
Mm,
So I think timing kind of all worked out the way it was supposed to. But then I got my diagnosis of Lyme disease. And, when I got the test through IGeneX, it lit up like a Christmas tree, so to say. And I thought, okay, this is my answer. And so just from there, I ended up following that non-traditional path into alternative health, integrative care, many different names for it. And I actually temporarily picked up and moved to another state to go to a clinic and be treated at this clinic. And so some of the big things that we did there was hyperthermia, which was pretty brutal in itself. I did it 5 days a week for several weeks, and I did it awake. So I've had some guests on my podcast in the past who have done hyperthermia and they get put to sleep and get put out. I kind of wish I did it that way. But nonetheless, it was one of my big game changers. There were a lot of game changers in my journey. Um, I went through, I guess, another year of treatment. And at this point, I had finally gotten approved for disability, which was hard, because initially when I applied, I didn't know what was wrong with me. And unfortunately, Lyme disease usually isn't one of the trigger words that gets you disability, unfortunately.
right.
So I had enough, symptoms and ailments and diagnosis of other things that I was able to get it. And I thought, okay, I'm a year into treatment. I'm going to kind of, you know, I think I can get my life back. So I took my disability back pay. I bought another home, a starting over home, because, I lost everything when I kind of threw in the towel and moved back to my hometown. And a couple more years of treatment, I was probably 60% better. And then the town I lived in burned down. So
Wow.
my starting over home is no longer. And so driving through the fire, I drove through the fire for 5 hours, called my family, said my goodbyes. Of course, go back to that trauma, right? Like that was emotional and probably a little bit of physical trauma going through the fire. Re-triggered a lot of things. Even a new co-infection decided to pop up, which I didn't realize at the time. So ended up moving to Idaho, did 3 more years of treatment, so many things, and eventually I regained my health. And so I just feel that it's so important to let others know that it doesn't matter where you are in your journey. And it doesn't matter if a doctor tells you you're too far gone, they can't help you. I simply don't believe it's true. Our bodies are amazing, right? And given the proper support, I think we can overcome anything. So,
I agree. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us.
welcome.
A couple of thoughts. I'm so glad that your Igenix, showed up like a Christmas tree, like you mentioned, so that you
Right.
could get that diagnosis. Unfortunately, way too many people end up with a negative IGeneX, right? And then they never get treated for Lyme and they probably still have Lyme. So I think it's important for people to remember that so much of a diagnosis is history and symptoms. That's what we learn in medical school. It's like 90% of the diagnosis, and that labs and physical exam is the other 10%. And yet, still, physicians kind of like lean very heavily on these labs. And unfortunately, that doesn't always serve people.
Exactly. And I do love hearing that many practitioners now are doing clinical diagnosis, just like you said, Evan, because our signs and symptoms, our body tells us a lot. And it is mostly like, so IGeneX is definitely one of the labs that I recommend because their accuracy is pretty good.
Yeah.
As far as primary care doctors, I was tested 3 times over 7 years and it was negative. So, but again, like I didn't know that testing is not accurate. And I also even thought Lyme disease was just something dogs got. So, talk about not being educated.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing with physicians, they're really not educated on so much of this.
Right.
They think, Bartonella is happens with cat scratch fever only, and then it's gone out of the body. And I also think it's interesting when you talked about how the stress of driving through that fire ended up causing a co-infection to pop up. I see so many people where they get a motor vehicle accident or they have some sort of stressful event, and then they end up getting symptoms that they may think is from a traumatic brain injury or something like that. But it turns out being from an infection that becomes opportunistic when the stress ends up causing the immune system to become dysfunctional. And that when you treat those infections, that their symptoms actually go away.
Yeah, no, it is. And I stress it a lot because, even a woman having, giving childbirth, that's a beautiful experience, right? But it's also very traumatic to your body.
Right.
And, with you dealing with a lot of people with COVID, I saw that a lot after COVID. It was, is it long haul COVID or is it Lyme disease, right? Like
Right.
what got brought out from this? And so I really think it's important that people don't hyper focus on I've never seen a tick before. I've never been bitten by a tick. I don't go in the woods. I don't, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
we have to really just look at what is going on in our body.
Yeah. Or I have a negative test,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
So yeah, I'm so pleased that you said that. That's so important. So in terms of, so how did you get that diagnosis? It sounds like you were an advocate for yourself. What is that like? You're continuing to search for the diagnosis. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of like the specifics of what people need to do as an advocate for themselves in order to get that diagnosis?
Yeah, that might be a little bit of a loaded question, right? So many of them are, I think, in this community. But I think the biggest thing is that we know our body. We do. We know, especially when we're talking in adulthood. Obviously, a lot of children deal with Lyme and it's hard for them to kind of express what's going on. So then you have to be, the parent trying to be the advocate for your child. But when it comes to being the advocate for ourselves, you know your body. So don't be dismissed.
Mhm.
These doctors that we hire and go to, they work for us. We don't work for them. And so it is okay to fire a practitioner. And in my case, it's okay to be fired as a patient. And so I think that doing our own research and, Google can be our best friend at times and our worst enemy at other times, right?
Right.
But going back to maybe some old school books from the library, I had mentioned that earlier. Like I really love the tangible items, the printed information that's backed by, science and stuff like that. And I really think that you can get some good information by turning the old pages of a book, because that was a big part of my journey was regular trips to the library, trying to learn how to get through this journey. But I truly think the biggest thing is know your body and don't let anybody dismiss you.
And was it a conventional practitioner who ended up ordering that hygienics for you, or was it a functional or naturopath or?
Well, Evan, it was me.
Uh-huh.
So, back in the day, I mean, and this was back 2015 when I finally did the IGeneX test. They don't do this now, just for your listeners. But back then, I had already been, down a rabbit hole for 7 years, had spent all the money, was already in debt, and I couldn't afford to spend a couple $1,000s to go meet a practitioner, right? And then pay another couple $1,000s to do the testing. And I got resourceful. I thought, the answer is always no unless you ask. And so I called up IGeneX and I told them my situation. And they said, no problem. We'll send you the application. You send in your payment. We'll send you the test kit. And I thought, well, that was too easy, right? Again, they no longer do this. You do need a practitioner to order the test for you. But in my case, it worked in my favor. And so then I get this test kit. I can't find anybody to draw my blood
Mhm.
because these doctors don't believe in Lyme disease. So I actually called the hospital and they were actually very familiar with it. I went down there, they drew my blood, and they were even so kind to say, I have this little thing. We know how to package it up. Would you like us to do that on your behalf? And I thought,
That's
okay,
sweet.
this was meant to be, right? So that was kind of how that transpired. And then I didn't need to be a scientist or a doctor to read the report. And I for sure was positive with, at that time, Lyme disease and Bartonella. And then, of course, all the other things down the road that come, the, candida, the parasites. Luckily, I didn't have mold, but there's so many things that go into this journey.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why in our program we treat everything. We treat all the heavy metals, all the chemicals, all the molds, all the different infections, and do the nervous system retraining because we just don't want to miss anything because it's
Yeah.
so hard to kind of get that diagnosis. And so you got the laboratory test and then you go to see somebody. Do you go see a Lyme expert?
So, what I did was, of course, Google, Lyme doctors near me. When I first Googled Lyme disease near me, Dr. Rawls came up. And
Mm,
he truly was kind of like the shining light in my dark day. I get a diagnosis. So, of course, I'm thrilled, right? Something really is wrong with me. I've been trying to convince people of this for 7 years. And so it was, what's my word? It was just rewarding and validating to have a diagnosis. But then I thought, oh gosh, I want to have anything but Lyme disease because it sounds like it's not very straightforward. And so I listened into a lot of Dr. Rawls' free webinars that he did back in the day, which he still does today. And so I Googled the doctor that was a few hours away from me, who was a Lyme literate doctor. He actually trains a lot of the Lyme literate doctors. And I thought, okay, this is, maybe a good plan. So I called him, I made an appointment for a consultation, and it would have been very convenient because insurance would have paid for some of it. And it was only a few hour drive from my home. But the majority of their treatment was IV
mm.
antibiotics. And I had two issues with that. One, not sure I trust Western medicine right now, right? Like I've kind of lost a lot of faith in that, even though this is a Lyme literate doctor. I truly thought that my body was too sick and weak. I didn't think I would survive the antibiotics. So then I seeked out alternative health and I did the same thing. I did a consultation in another state. And oddly enough, what they did, one of the things was they did dark field microscopy. Did I say that right? I think,
Good, you did good.
where you actually see the spirochetes in your blood. But they talked about a lot of things, like the hyperthermia, um, ozone, colonics, like all these really crazy things. I had no idea what they were talking about. The clinic was full of people with IVs in them, and it was pretty much $20,000 to kind of start the program, and I had to move. And so everything should have steered me away, but that was where my heart and my gut led me, and I'm grateful it did. So I never did do an antibiotic during my journey, and I still got well. So
Nice. Wonderful. Yes. And yeah, oftentimes it's harder to get well when you take antibiotics.
for
Um,
many reasons, right? As we know, yeah.
yeah. Do you think that people can get better from Lyme disease with conventional medicine?
Um, I do. I think that there needs to be a combination for sure. I think that there are many layers to treating Lyme disease, and it's not just killing the pathogens, right? Like there's so many other layers that need to be addressed. But I have seen in the community where some people do get well, everything based on insurance coverage. So going through, traditional doctors, doing antibiotics. I want to say if I was just hypothetically guessing, maybe 2 or 3% this works for. So it's not a big majority of the community, but I would lean more towards kind of incorporating both, right? Maybe some if you are wanting to go the antibiotic route are needing some insurance coverage, and also adding in maybe some herbal therapies as well would be a great combination versus just one.
Yeah, and I think it would take a special conventional practitioner to to have success because most of the time if they are going to give you antibiotics, they're going to give you antibiotics for a month. Unless they are specifically trained or they
Right.
seek training once they realize that this is going to be an issue. And so, yeah, they can definitely be an MD, a DO, nurse practitioner, PA, and get you well, but they have to be kind of and they can use insurance for a number of these treatments, but oftentimes they're going to be on the fringes in order to be able to really understand if they are going to be, in fact, they'd have to be Lyme literate. I would say if they are going to be conventional, they do need to be Lyme literate if they're going to use antibiotics. Would you agree?
For sure, because the standard, I mean, now I think sometimes is even 7 days, 10 days of an antibiotic,
Right.
which first of all, it's not going to help for chronic Lyme, and it's not even going to help for an acute bite, right? Like you truly need 6 to 8 weeks of antibiotics for an initial bite. And when you have a new infection, 100% do the antibiotics, right? I would still throw some other things in it. But,
Mhm.
if I went back to, I mean, I guess I can't say that about me now, but I do definitely recommend antibiotics only with people that have a brand new bite, immediate symptoms, or the bullseye rash. But it's hard to find a practitioner that's going to give you the 6 to 8 weeks of antibiotics that you need. But yes, and so somebody in the traditional field, if they are on board with, months and months of continuous antibiotics, maybe switching them up, maybe pulsing them, yes, that would be somebody that could possibly work for you in the conventional field.
Yeah. And I think I'm mixing my terminology here, but in terms of conventional medicine, I think of because you can be a conventional practitioner and still be practicing something that is more complementary, integrative, functional alternative. You know what I mean? So I think about your primary care provider who's not trained in Lyme as like more conventional medicine as opposed to somebody who is conventionally trained and also has specific Lyme training, like maybe from iLads or something like that. And then there's beyond that, where then you're using more herbs, and then you're also addressing maybe some more of the environmental causes, like the heavy metals you talked about, your mercury chelation therapy that you received, and then maybe even into the toxic five, kind of like what I talk about, including the nervous system dysfunction that we want to get into. So maybe that spectrum helps a little bit more with kind of so that we're both talking about the same thing and so that people who are listening can kind of get a sense of the skill set that you really need in order to get better is going to need to be more advanced down that line so that you don't miss the causes that you have and that you're not, relying on your conventional doctor and really hoping and praying that this person who is your primary care physician who doesn't know anything about Lyme or anything else related to chronic disease for that matter can really support you.
Yeah, no, and thank you for clarifying that because it is. It can become overwhelming, all the titles and what you call this and what you call that. Yeah, so definitely that was probably a good clarification for the listeners.
Awesome, thank you. And so I know you have a 6-step process or kind of like a framework, the main layers, I guess, to healing from Lyme that you kind of that you had received and that you also are seeing other people be successful with. Can you kind of go into that?
Yeah, in fact, many of these, it was something I pieced together from my journey, right? And sometimes we learn things in a roundabout way that we were doing something for another reason and discovered, hey, this actually needs to be part of this Lyme journey.
Right.
And so there are certainly many, many things that we need to do, right? Like we always need to protect our gut and, our microbiome and stuff like that. But as far as the kind of my thoughts, my terminology of kind of the 6 key points that I feel we have to address all of them is one, killing the pathogens. I still believe that we do need to do the antimicrobials. We've got to kill the pathogens that we're dealing with, right? And then two, detox. Detox is probably more important than actually killing the pathogens, I believe, right? Because if we're killing things and we're not detoxing out through our body or, utilizing binders of some sort, these toxins are going to recirculate within our body, right? And we're not going to get them out. So detoxing and, liver love, liver support, keeping your lymphatic system open, and just really working on keeping those detox pathways open and flowing is important. And then you had mentioned this earlier, Evan, addressing mold, parasites, and metal toxicities because they're really can be a piece that maybe never bothered you before you became chronically ill with something,
Right.
because a lot of time our environment is toxic, and so we all are just toxic. We all have certain things, but most of the time our immune system can keep them everything at bay. And so when we run down our immune system, chronic illness takes over, all these other things can kind of come flooding in. And I've seen so many times uh, mold be one of the missing pieces to healing from the journey. So, and then my fourth one would be our nervous system. And this is one of the things that I wished I would have known when I started this journey, exactly how important the nervous system is. And I talk about this a lot because this is one thing that there are many ways to help our nervous system, but I know many people out there are bedbound. They have no money. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to start. And so they think, well, I just can't do anything, so I'm just going to lay here and give up. And that's really where some, easy nervous system tools can work and help benefit you while you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, right? The baseline is our nervous system. So why not start working on that? And then the fifth one is blocked traumas. And I think that this is one of the pieces many people miss. Many people can get well in the community. You mentioned my podcast earlier. I've been doing it for over 6 years. I've had a lot of guests on my show. And unfortunately, I've seen many of them get sick again. Something triggered their body. Now they're no longer in remission. And I
Mhm.
think it's because they missed the blocked trauma, or even my sixth step is the emotional side of this journey. A lot of people are familiar with the grieving process, right? If you lose a loved one, you can Google a grieving process, and some have, 5 steps, 7 steps, 10 steps. But going through the Lyme journey is almost like going through a grieving process. We're grieving who we used to be. We're grieving relationships that we've lost. We're grieving finances that we've lost. We've lost who we are. What is our importance in this life? How do we move forward? How do we, rebuild the confidence that we lost when, especially like somebody for me, when I didn't know my name? How am I supposed to regain that confidence? And so there's an emotional side to this journey too. And I think that the blocked traumas and the emotional side are the pieces that people don't think that need to be addressed. And I can assure you that they do, or you're going to be living in a bubble or bubble wrapped, right? And be petrified of going hiking or going anywhere where you might be near ticks. And it's heartbreaking to see so many people live a sheltered life because they're in fear. And I can tell you that it doesn't need to be that way. So those are kind of my 6 personal steps of the different layers that I think all need to be addressed.
I love it. And I love how I mean, this is my bag too that I talk a lot about. I call it the toxic five, the heavy
Yeah,
metals, the chemicals, the molds, the infections, and the nervous system dysfunction. But you've broken out nervous system dysfunction into the nervous system repair and then the block traumas and then the emotional side. So I really want to dive into those because I think I mean, you and I have both seen people focus on those and get better. And so
yes.
even without doing the detoxification and killing off the pathogens, though, generally people will get to if you do one or the other, you generally get to a certain place and then you plateau, and then you do the other one and you get the rest of the way better. So I
Right.
do think that combining the two gives the greatest chance of success. And doing the nervous system retraining, working on your trauma and your emotions are really non-negotiables for me.
100%.
Um, so let's kind of dive into some of those so we can give some people some practical tools coming away from this. So, do you have favorite nervous system retraining practices that you recommend?
I kind of am one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about giving back to this community is because my 13-year journey cost me $1 million. And that's not okay. It should not be like that, right? And so it's really important to me to share tools that are free or tools that are $10 or $20, right? Obtainable for everyone because there's so many people out there that have lost hope because they don't have money. They think that they can't get well. And so I personally haven't done any of the EMDR training. There's many things out there that are available that you can do that are fabulous, but can we afford them, right? And so one of the things that I did that little did I know I was doing it for this reason was, I had mentioned earlier, Evan, that I had gone through the fire in 2018. And so when I moved to Idaho, of course, I was still very sick because I took a lot of steps backwards in my healing journey. And so it had been maybe about a year later that I still couldn't smell burning leaves outside, or I couldn't look at a barbecue. I couldn't, the fear of the flames was
Mhm.
just too much. And so I seeked out therapy that wasn't covered by my insurance. It was just a normal therapist, not specializing in Lyme or anything. And I didn't go there for Lyme. I went there for how do I, you know, overcome the fear of fire, right? And I knew that it was logical for me to feel this way because I almost died. But I can't live in fear. Like I have to get past this. What am I going to do? And I thought counseling. Counseling's wonderful. Therapists are wonderful. So I did that. And little did I know, after quite some time, we no longer were talking about the fire. We were talking about Lyme. And it was then that it truly dawned on me that healing through the emotional side of this journey is it's you have to do it, right? Like it can't even be questionable, I don't think. And so it was back to the fact that I remember if I was standing there talking to two people and one person would say, "Hey, where's the nearest gas station?" And I said, "Oh, it's, go up this road and it's on the left-hand side." And the person standing next to me, "Oh, no, it's on the right-hand side." You're right. You're right. I'm wrong. I'm wrong. Like I had zero confidence in anything that went through my brain or came out of my mouth. And that's coming from somebody, that I was pretty sharp. I had a great career. It wasn't like I was not educated, but that's what Lyme does to our bodies. And so to go through the therapy and to talk about it, right? And kind of understand and take blessings away from tragedy. Truly, I believe that something good comes from everything that is bad. And it's not just a thing in my mind. I'm like, okay, I have to think this way. Like, I truly believe it. And so going through the therapist was really something beneficial for me. Um, and then other than that, so I'm sorry, I kind of probably went off track there a little bit. Well, we're talking about the blocked traumas of it.
Sure, we
Is
can
that,
go
or were
there.
we talking about? Okay. And so there's a couple of books that I recommend. One is by Dr. Bradley Nelson, The Body Keeps the Score, The Emotion Code. And then the other one, I can't pronounce the author anyways, but it's The Body Keeps the Score. They're both really The Body Keeps the Score is kind of more going back to that traditional, conventional or not. It's more a little bit scientific-y versus the Emotion Code, which is more kind of like energy, holistic type of thing. And that is truly my favorite book. There's lots of things in there that they can kind of walk you through on how to try to unblock these traumas that are within you. And there's some pretty incredible stories that he shares in there that really explains how blocked traumas can inhibit your healing.
Nice.
So those
So
are some of
just
the things.
so getting the book and working through it, it sounds like there's a bit of a workbook in there where you can start because I believe there's also emotion code practitioners and there's an emotion code program that people could do if they wanted to, but it sounds like the
Yes.
book was sufficient for you
The
along with
book
the counseling.
absolutely was sufficient for me, and the therapy sessions was what worked for me, right? And then also constantly doing those positive affirmations about trying to work through things, I think was a huge shift as well.
And so then in terms of like number four, the nervous system retraining, do you put mindset work in there, breath work? What sort of tools do you have in there?
I throw it all in there, Evan.
Okay,
Let's throw the whole kitchen sink, right?
good.
Because the nervous system is so important. It deserves so much help and support.
Right.
And so I do. Like our mindset is huge. Again, if I could go back to kind of the beginning of my journey, one, I would be my own advocate much, much faster. But if I would have known the power of our mindset and our nervous system and our journey, I think that my process would have gone much faster. And so I think that for our nervous system, there are just so many things. We can go back to If you want to stimulate your vagus nerve, right? Like they have these little tools and machines you can put on there. Um, do we need to do that? I'm sure that they're great, right? But again, I love to talk about the things that are free or affordable. And so just simply by a little handheld massager from Amazon, right? Like I'll massage your vagus nerve, which is
Oh,
goes down
nice.
both sides of your thing, right?
Mm.
Um, Gargling can stimulate your vagus nerve. Humming, singing, um, sound therapy is one of my favorite ones. Breath work is another one of my favorite ones. Um, Cold showers. That was not anything I was ever could get on board with because apparently I'm too chicken or too much of a sissy, right? But there are just so many ways that we can support our nervous system at home, even if you are bedbound, right? Meditation is great. Tapping. You can go on YouTube and look up ways to support your nervous system. There's a video for everything out there, right? They can walk you through a tapping process. Some of these things sound maybe a little off the wall, right? For some of the listeners, because I know that they were for me. You're telling me if I gargle and hum and take a cold shower and change my mindset and breathe, that it's going to make a difference in my healing. And I promise you it is.
Yeah.
But I was there too. I was like, I've never heard of such a thing. But again, we do live in a world of instant gratification. And
Right.
so it is not going to be, yeah, I want you to sit there and do one of these things, a couple of times. It's that's not the way it works.
Right.
Consistency is what works. And so what I like to tell people that I chat with or help through their journey is that pick one or two things. Maybe you're still working and so you're driving, which means you can't go outside and do grounding, right? Like put your bare feet onto the earth, right? Like that's another way to help our nervous system. Pick what works for you. Can I do a breathing thing while driving? Pick two of them and do them 3, 4, 5 times throughout the day, every single day. It takes a few minutes each, right?
Right.
So pick the tools that work for you. Some may not resonate with you, and that's okay. Try something different, but it's consistency over time where you're going to notice the changes.
And I tell people that you're not going to notice it day one. You may not even notice it day 90. But at some point from doing this every day, every other day, if you're really not up for it, you are going to notice a significant improvement. Like
In
the
your
light bulb
health,
comes on.
right? And so maybe they're like, that didn't have anything to do with those. It does, right? When we can calm our nervous system, that's when our body feels safe enough to heal. So they may not feel like, hey, my lungs feel better because I'm doing all this breathing, right? But it's because we're noticing that our bodies are starting to make some shifts in the healing journey. And it's coming from your body feeling safe within your nervous system.
Yeah. And there's research on all of this.
Yes.
So this isn't voodoo for those who are listening who are like, gosh, that sounds too weird. The reality is that if you're not doing well, you definitely need to move in this direction. And it's regardless of whatever condition you have. If you've got Lyme, if you've got chronic fatigue, if you have high blood pressure, like nervous system retraining, vagus nerve stimulation helps just about everybody out there. You know,
Absolutely.
um, you know,
It, it,
the and it's not just that you're getting older when you start to have these symptoms. You know, like
right.
like there are problems that need to be addressed. What were you gonna
Yeah.
say?
I was just going to say, just in general, like I think by keeping a strong foundation, right? Like that's what keeps us away from chronic illness. And so life in general is stressful. Our environment is toxic,
Right.
right? And so whether you're healthy or, think that you're healthy, you have no symptoms, things within your nervous system you can always be working on, right? It helps you to manage your stress, your anxiety. These are tools that healthy people can use too, instead of going to the doctor and taking a pill because I have anxiety or stress. Again, we go back to just our bodies are beautiful and the fact that they're just designed in a way that we truly can work through things to help support it to keep us well.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Just wanted to
This
make it
is
clear that we didn't have to all be sick to be able to have to, work on things in our nervous system.
exactly. And we may not know that we are not well per se. I mean, are we as healthy at 50 as we are at 20? Most people are not. And some of that has to do with how we eat, how our metabolism changes, our cell health, etc. But a lot of it has to do with the health of our nervous system. A lot of people end up getting anxiety if you have anxiety, you got it as you got older, and maybe there is a pathogen or something like that, but sometimes it's just life. Sometimes it's the accumulation of the number of stressful hits that you have, whether they are mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, energetic, etc. So really important, as a long-term solution is to make these a part of your practice, so that you can be well for as long as possible.
Completely agree. It's impossible to avoid stress out there, right? Like people are
Exactly.
stressed about their finances, their marriage, their children, their job, there's just all sorts of reasons to be stressed. It's how we manage stress because stress can really be the death of us, to
Yeah.
put it bluntly, like it can be. So we have to manage stress so that things keep flowing through our body and keeping us well.
Yeah. So this has been wonderful. We have just a couple minutes left. Where can people go to learn more about you and to participate in your community? Tell us a little bit about your community and what they need to. It's a Facebook group, correct?
Yes, currently just kind of working through Facebook. It's Lyme and Beyond with Tanya. So it's a private group, so people can kind of feel secure in there asking questions, getting information. It's a place where I share everything I learned along my journey. And then because of my journey, things that I've learned. And so again, I talk about ways to support your nervous system. I do a lot of sound therapy. I love tuning forks. I created a video on there about how I use my tuning forks to help with my sleep. And so there's just a conglomeration of information there. So we can call it, it's not necessarily a support group, more of a resource group, right? Where you can ask and get some information from somebody who's been through the journey, right? And things that you can do. I am actually in the process of creating a website because, Facebook is just a place where they can flag you if they don't like what you say, right? If you're going to talk about the voodoo things, right, that we talk about sometimes, Evan, Facebook doesn't necessarily like that. So I am in the works of trying to get a Facebook page so I can have, a website so I can just have one platform where I share everything on there. But right
Wonderful.
now, Lyme and Beyond with Tanya on Facebook.
Wonderful. So if you found this inspiring, if you want to learn more about those tools from Tanya, because she also is doing photobiomodulation and a number of other things, definitely go in there, check it out, and see all the resources that she shares. Thank you so much for being with me here today, Tanya. Really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, absolutely. It was my pleasure. I truly appreciate you allowing me to utilize your platform to really spread some more awareness about Lyme disease because we need to be validated. We need to be heard. We need to be talked about, right? And so I appreciate you and what you do. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Happy to help. So if you have chronic fatigue, whether it's from long COVID or chronic fatigue syndrome, go ahead and click the link below to watch my latest masterclass, where I go deep into our four-step process that has helped thousands of others resolve their symptoms naturally. After you watch that video, if you're interested in seeing if we're a good fit to work together, you can then get on a free call with me. All right, thanks so much. I'll see you over there. I hope you learned something on today's podcast. If you did, please share it with your friends and family and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's really helpful for getting this information out to more people who desperately need it. Sharing all the experts I know and love and the powerful tips I have is one of my absolute favorite things to do. Thanks for being part of my community. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. It is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Thanks for listening and have an amazing day.